This episode of The Minimalists is brought to you by nobody, because advertisements suck.
The Minimalists.
Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name's Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I'm Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists.
Today we're here with author and environmental lawyer Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose new podcast can be found at anchor.fm/RFK Jr. or wherever you listen to podcasts. Robert, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I thought we would start by answering some questions here. Our first one is from Jessica.
What is our biggest environmental problem? Deforestation, air pollution, global warming, water pollution, natural resource depletion. Is it too late to fix it?
It's an expansive question, right?
Yeah. So I mean, to sum it up, what's our biggest environmental problem, and is it too late to fix it?
It depends what you care about. First of all, let me explain my voice, because your audience may not be used to hearing me. I used a very strong voice till I was 42 years old, and then I got a disease called spasmodic dystonia. It makes my voice tremble like this, and particularly when I first start talking, it trembles. Usually it gets better, or people get used to it as I talk. So I just kind of want to get that out of the way so people, aren't wondering about it. To me, the thing that I think is most disturbing is the extinction of species.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that even when I was a kid, I heard about the dodo bird. I was like, just very disturbed about that, and felt like almost a sense of betrayal. Like, how could people let a species go extinct?
Yeah.
And having this sense of that we don't really have the. It's morally wrong to destroy something that you cannot create or that you cannot recreate. And, now we're in the middle because of human factors. We are now in the middle of the biggest mass extinction in history.
Yeah.
The climate change is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And population is a factor too, but those things in some case. Well, and you asked, the question is, can we reverse it? We can do our best to mitigate it.
Right.
But at this point, our children are not going to have the same opportunities, no matter what we do at this point, for dignity and enrichment and good health as we had.
Yeah.
And that, is a tragic, and it's a moral issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the question is, what can we do? It's really we're involved in a war, and it's a war against mainly, most of these problems are the cause of large corporations who are politically powerful, who are enmeshed and vested in this. In consumerism and in bad behavior,
Right.
who are not looking out for humanity, but because of the nature of our laws, they're incentivized to make decisions that enrich themselves by impoverishing the rest of us.
Right. It's at the detriment of other people.
Yeah.
It's incredibly selfish. Ryan and I certainly aren't against consumption, and we all consume some stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people often mistake us for ascetics or some sort of monks or something like that. No, we try to live well within society. And I think part of that has to do with being intentional, but also being intentional about not harming other people, which actually leads me to a question that Izzy has here. Izzy says, at what point is it dangerous to keep saying there are no shoulds? So Ryan and I often talk about, there are no shoulds. What we really mean by that is we often overly moralize everything. We'll tell people you shouldn't eat carbs after 3 p.m. or something. You see it on commercials and podcasts and you sort of these internet experts telling us we should do this, you shouldn't do that, you should do this. And most of them are just opinions. You could do this, or you don't have to do this, or whatever. But of course there is morality in life, and there are some shoulds. Ryan, you should not kidnap my daughter.
I should not. That is correct. Could you even take it? I don't know. So you're saying there are some shoulds, because I'm saying you could rephrase that and say something like, Ryan, I prefer you not to kidnap my daughter because that would really hurt our family, and it really seems immoral. I prefer you not do that, but I guess that still is kind of a should.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking, I mean, this is all, it gets complicated with language.
Yeah.
When we talk about things as good or bad, should or shouldn't, that we often overly moralize things. I want to avoid becoming fully nihilistic and just saying, well, nothing matters at all. There is no moral good or bad. That's not what we're talking about here. To continue Izzy's question, you want to read the rest of it, Ryan?
Sure. It says, I get caught up in trying to fight for environmental justice, but worry I'm crossing the line. I don't want to tell anyone how to live their life, but I'm unwilling to let go of my attachment to caring for the earth. So I have strong opinions about what people shouldn't do. Environmentalism is an idea that I cannot back down from, compromise on, or see from both sides.
I think this is a problem, too, when we're not willing to even look at the other side. And, Bobby, it seems to me that what you do well is you are able to see both sides and even consider even the side of the corporation. If someone's being immoral, you're able to even see it from their point of view, and you can quickly cast judgment on that person or entity. But can we talk a little bit about this? Because it is a moral quandary.
I try to stay away from telling people how they should live their lives. And I really, I hope I don't do that.
Yeah.
And that's not, I believe in personal liberties and that people should make their own choices. And I don't think the big driver of environmental destruction is you can change it with individual choices. And I was on a board for many years with the CEO of Procter & Gamble. And he showed me data. They have data going back, consumer data going back about more than a century. And what he showed me is that people there's a steady number of people who will change their purchasing behavior because of moral appeals. In other words,
Sure.
If you do this, if you buy this, it's better for society, and it never gets more than 8% of the public.
Yeah.
Never. You can change people's behavior by saying it's good for your health, so it's an individually good for me. But people are going to buy essentially the cheapest thing. Most of the people. To me, what you guys do is really, and I've seen your video, and I think it's really important. But it's more important because it's important, as I said, for us as individuals, for our peace of mind, that we live moral lives and that we live connected lives and that we live mindfully. And I remember a lot of my attitudes came out of it in the 1960s. It was an advertisement on TV. It was the biggest PSA ever in history, and it showed somebody throwing some garbage out of the window of a car.
Yes.
And there was an Indian standing on the road who was crying.
Yeah,
it
the
was
tear.
a tear,
Uh-huh.
right? And it got $500 million of free PSA time.
Wow.
It was made by a group called Keep America Beautiful.
Right.
And people thought that was an environmental group, but it wasn't. It was a coalition of glass bottle manufacturers and aluminum can manufacturers whose principal objective was to fight bottle bills from being passed in the 50 states.
Wow.
Oh, it was trying to tell American consumers the reason we have garbage is because you guys are slobs. It's not because the corporations aren't paying for litter disposal.
Right.
And in the United States, the highest altitude landmark on the east coast of North America is the Fresh Kills landfill.
Okay. Wow.
And the reason, and they don't have landfills like that in Europe. Why? Because in Europe, garbage disposal is not paid for by the taxpayer. In our country, garbage disposal is subsidized by the taxpayer. And so Amazon will send you a credit card in a shoebox.
Right.
As it can plaster the outside of that shoebox with advertising. So
Yes.
it becomes an advertising vehicle for them, and there's no cost to them from doing that.
Right.
In Europe, people who send out, companies that send out packaging have to weigh it and measure it, and then they have to recover it. And anything they don't recover, they have to pay for. And as a result of that, when you get a CD in Europe, it comes in cellophane. When you get a credit card, it comes in a tiny little envelope. Because the guy who sent that, the company that sent that to you, has to pay for the disposal, and that goes to his bottom line. But if you don't, and you don't get these big packages that are filled with little styrofoam peanuts, right, that are with some tiny little item in it.
It drives me crazy when I get a box that is just it's nothing. It's a little timer like this, and it's a 5-gallon box filled with styrofoam.
I thought it was laziness. I didn't realize it was intentional for advertising. That's wild.
But it's incentivizing good behavior if the government is saying to you, there is no cost to you for you putting garbage and packaging into the stream of commerce.
Yeah.
If you're in Europe and you're a manufacturer and you put packaging into the stream of commerce, you have to recover it. You have to show that it's recycled or recovered, or you pay for it. And because of that, you are incentivized to not create packaging. So, and to me, the way that you change, and this goes back to what I said originally about Procter & Gamble, the way that you change behavior is not through appealing to people's morality.
Yeah, so it's not back to what Izzy is saying, you shouldn't do this, because that's not really helpful.
It doesn't help. And it can only 8% of people, and usually only 3% will respond to those appeals.
So at least 92% of people are checking out immediately.
They're not going to listen to you. So what you do is you incentivize good behavior by integrating, by rationalizing the marketplace, by saying you can make money by doing good things rather than we're going to allow you to make money by doing bad things, by flooding the nation with garbage. So, for example, if we had a carbon tax, people then would figure out, we would innovate new ways, and they did this in the state of California, which is why California uses less energy, about 8,000 kilowatts, whereas the national uses about 12,000 kilowatts per person, per household.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that California changed the laws to incentivize good behavior and to punish bad behavior. A true free market that's what it should do. It should incentivize good behavior by saying you can use carbon if you want, but if you do, you're going to pay for it because it's hurting other people.
And we're also not going to subsidize it.
We're not going to subsidize it. We're not going to allow you to externalize your costs through pollution. If you pollute, you're welcome to pollute, but if you do it, you're going to pay a price for it. And there's certain pollution we're not going to allow, which is toxics.
Right.
But if you do other pollution, if you put carbon into the stream of into the public area, into the public commons, if you put ozone and particulates or these other pollutants, we're going to charge you, and that is going to incentivize you to switch to more efficient forms of creating energy and creating products. And that's really what we want to do. It's not to tell everybody don't buy a new car.
Right.
Tell the manufacturers you cannot build a car unless we're going to charge you, we're going to incentivize you to build cars that have the lowest energy consumption that is possible. And the more that you do that, the more money you're going to make. So it's a marketplace that allows people to make money by doing good things rather than telling you that you can make money by doing bad things to your neighbor.
Ultimately, it's the carrot and the stick. And what you're saying is the carrot is so much more effective, at least for the vast majority of the population.
Nobody likes a busybody, and nobody likes a nag.
Right.
And nobody wants to be told, you can't behave this way because you're hurting the planet. And I don't do that to people.
And in fact, it makes me want to do the opposite quite often. If someone tells me you shouldn't do that, I almost want to do it out of spite.
Right.
It's like, well, what do you mean? I'm going to go out and just turn my car on for a while just to, piss this person off. Of course, I'm not actually going to do that. But there's something in in humanity that makes us say, whoa, don't tell me what to do.
Right.
Leave me alone. But if you incentivize me to do something, I'm much more likely to do it.
Yeah. Maybe we do a reverse psychology marketing plan of you should litter.
Look, it used to be in the state of California, if you wanted to build a power plant, you would go to the Public Service Commission, the utility would, and say, look, there's a demand for this energy, and I'm going to build a power plant. Here's how much it's going to cost. I'm going to build a coal-burning power plant. Here's how much it's going to cost, and here's how much the rates are going to rise because of that. And we're going to build that plant for $100 million, let's say.
Yeah.
And we want our board, our shareholders, to make 12% interest on that. And if the PSA said that was okay, if you were able to convince them, then you would build that power plant, you would have $100 million into it. And the cost of that plant is now integrated into the rate base, and your shareholders are making 12% a year on that investment. And what we did in the late 70s and early 80s, we changed the California rule to say that we are going to incentivize you to build power plants that don't use carbon or to make expenditures that don't use carbon. So for $100 million, you can go, the power company can go into 20 million homes and change out the old light bulbs and put in new ones. They can go and buy your old refrigerator and put in one that used 2% of the energy.
Wow.
And for that $100 million, they can create 5 times as much energy as if they built a new power plant.
Wow.
And they can make the 12%. You're incentivizing them to do something that is much better for society rather than just focus. You're giving people the power to do well by doing good.
Yes.
Right.
Rather than telling them there's one way to do this and it's by burning more coal. And that's, right now, if we actually told people you're going to pay the true cost of that coal, which is you build a coal plant, you're acidifying virtually every lake in the Adirondacks and in the Appalachian chain from Georgia to northern Quebec. You are, the coal plants in this country now cause about $375 million a year in lung damage, in healthcare costs. In the states that have coal, like Kentucky and West Virginia, the federal government pays for extra pavement. They have to put 12 inches of pavement to support the coal trucks on the highways.
Oh, wow.
We pay those costs.
Sure.
Wow.
You have every freshwater fish in America now has mercury in its flesh. There's a healthcare cost for that as well.
Yeah.
If you told those coal plants you have to internalize those costs, coal, instead of costing 5 cents a kilowatt hour, would cost 50 cents a kilowatt hour, and nobody would be buying coal power.
It just wouldn't make sense financially.
It wouldn't make sense if you force them to internalize the cost. So it's really a market failure. The market is not telling them you have to pay the true cost of bringing that product to market, which includes the cost of cleaning up after yourself, which was a lesson we were all supposed to have learned in kindergarten.
Right.
We are incentivizing them to behave badly. And in fact, there was the president or the CEO of Duke Energy, which is one of the biggest coal fleets in the world, in the country. I think it's the largest coal-burning fleet in the country of power plants, of generating facilities. He had kids. He was in North Carolina. He saw what it was doing to the waters. He saw how bad it was for the country. And he went to Congress and said, you need to change the rules to force us to internalize the cost, because then I can close all my coal plants and I can switch to something much better. And Congress, the coal industry, blocked him.
Oh, my God.
And
Wow.
What? Because he said, I'm destroying the planet and destroying the life that my kids are having by operating these plants. But I can't close them on my own because my shareholders would sue me. His responsibility as a CEO is to maximize shareholder value.
Right.
Yeah, he has a fiduciary responsibility.
Right, and that's what these companies. It's not their fault that they're immoral. It's that we have created rules that incentivize them to act that way.
Yeah.
For example, if you see, after Hurricane Katrina, you saw Walmart bringing bottles of water down to the Katrina victims, and they're not doing that to be good guys.
Right.
They're doing it because the optics of them doing that make Walmart look good and make more people shop there, which increases shareholder value.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If they were actually doing it just to be good guys, any of their shareholders could sue them for wasting corporate assets. Corporations are not allowed to act altruistically. They're not allowed to act philanthropically.
There's a few exceptions to that, right? Like B corporations and.
Well, if you organize the company differently, but how many companies are B corporations?
Maybe
I don't think there's
1,200?
any on the Fortune 500.
No, I don't think so.
And so, yeah, you can do it that way, but that's not how most of them are organized. Most of them are organized according to, that virtually everything on the Dow Jones is organized so that the shareholders know that the corporation is acting basically in their short-term economic interests.
Right.
And what we're doing is we're incentivizing CEOs. So people like the CEO of Duke, he has to wake up every morning and say, am I going to make decisions today that are good for humanity, or am I going to make decisions that are good for my shareholders?
Yeah.
Because those two things are not the same.
Right, and for him, they are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and what you want to do is you want to create a market. You can design markets any way you want. You want to design markets to rationalize them so that people are able to make money by doing good things for humanity rather than forcing them to, like you're forcing him, to make money by destroying people and the planet.
Well, I want to talk to you about some of the true costs of things, because it's fascinating. When you pick up an object from a shelf and you see the price tag on the thing, that's the price of the thing. But the true cost goes well beyond the price tag. There's, of course, the environmental cost of producing the thing or trashing the thing. But also, Ryan and I often talk about, from a minimalist perspective, it's the storage space for the thing. And so we need to have larger homes than ever before to keep all of our things. And when our homes are overflowing, put in our garages and basements. And then the storage locker industry, there's more storage facilities than there are corporate Starbucks. And so there are all these places where we're holding on to all these things, and the true cost is unbelievable. But when we think about the environment, we often pretend as though the environment and humans are sort of standing in separate corners of the room. There's like an external environment. We don't think about what it does to our internal environment. So we have a question here from our friend Chris Kelly, a former podcast guest, who has a question about this.
Yeah, he wrote in, can you get RFK to talk about our leap first, look later approach to environmental chemicals? The quintessential example is BPA. Now we have BPS, BPF, BPB, BPAF. They all have similar properties, but hey, they're BPA free.
That's a marketing ploy, right? You see all this all the time. BPA free, right?
And they just change one molecule on it,
Right.
and then they say the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's equally harmful.
That's the same with PFOAs. And, the problem is, this is what Rachel Carson pointed out in 1961 when she wrote Silent Spring, and she told Americans for the first time these chemicals are imposing hidden costs on you because nobody understood that. And the chemists were heroes. They were the people from DuPont and Dow and these other companies who had won World War II. They had created, DDT and killed the mosquitoes, and now we had won the war against the Nazis, and now we were going to win the war against the bugs. And what she said is, wait a second, you're going to kill the bugs, but you're going to kill all the birds too, and you're going to kill your house pets, and you're going to give cancer to your children. And these are all the hidden costs of these chemicals.
Did we know this early on? I suspect there wasn't a whole lot of knowledge, and even today, your average person.
Nobody knew when she wrote that book. She was a very interesting woman. I met her at my house in 1962. My uncle at that, Monsanto was trying to destroy her. She never spoke out to defend herself because she was dying of cancer at the time. But my uncle, I'm very proud of, President Kennedy, went to her aid. And his own Department of Agriculture was leading. I mean, the people who were arrayed against her were incredible. The American Medical Association was like trying to kill her because they were saying, you know, they're always on the side of big chemicals and big companies. And they were saying DDT is important because it kills mosquitoes and malaria is a big health threat.
Yeah.
You had Sports Illustrated doing an editorial against her, Time Magazine, Life Magazine. You had, which are all kind of, you know, at that point, all tied in with the war machine and the CIA. And you had the American Garden Club coming out against her. So she was being attacked from every direction.
Oh my
She
God.
was this, you know, this extraordinary woman. She was a marine biologist, brilliant marine biologist. She'd written 2 other bestsellers before. She didn't see the ocean until she was 22 years old. She was born in kind of the backwoods of Pennsylvania, but she was a very fluid, eloquent writer, and she was able to translate science into something that the layperson could read. She wrote this book in 1961, Silent Spring, that became the biggest bestseller in history. And she was attacked. Monsanto put millions and millions into creating public relations agencies and trying to destroy her and her reputation. My uncle, breaking with his own Department of Agriculture, created, led by Jerome Wisner, who was his science advisor, created this this independent group of scientists to read through her book and to check it for factual accuracy.
Yeah.
And, you know, she was being told, you know, like people are today, that it's full of misinformation, chemical misinformation, and that you're lying to the public and you're endangering the public, etc. And that committee vindicated her on every principal point that she made in that book. And she died a couple of years later. In 1976, we passed a law called TSCR. There's a Toxic Substance Control Act. But by then, by the time we passed it, the chemical industry had gotten control of Congress. And they put provisions in that statute that would make it almost impossible to enforce. And that's what happened. So since then, 85,000 new chemicals have come on the market, many of them associated with these consumer products you guys are so deeply concerned about. In that time, only 200 of those chemicons have ever been tested.
So we have 100,000 chemicals basically that are untested.
And only 5 of them have been banned.
Oh my God.
And the way that it works is that EPA has no budget to test the chemicals. So, and the chemicals, the way the act works is a chemical is innocent until it's proven guilty. And the company is in charge of conducting the tests. And what the company does is the company, you know, hires these phony scientists, we call them biostitutes, create these, you know, these phony studies that show that it's safe. The endpoint is already there before they do this study.
And find us a way to get to this endpoint, basically.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and so I'm someone who has really bad chemical sensitivities, and so like I can't go into a room that's been freshly painted, for example. And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with some different pharmaceutical interventions, and I'm sure we can even talk about the pharmaceutical industry at some point today or during the Maximal. But all of these chemicals, what's really fascinating about this is I think the average person, even today, like they hear BPA, but they're like, I don't even know what that is. And now I'm hearing about like all the chemicals in drinking water. Consumer Reports just did this study where, you know, my favorite drinking water, Topo Chico, had like 10 times the quote acceptable level of PUFAs or whatever the acronym is for chemicals. And so we have all of these chemicals entering our bodies every day, whether we're breathing it or we're ingesting it, and we don't even know what's going into us. And it's no wonder that we're so sick.
I mean, our children are now kind of walking around in just this witch's brew of toxic chemicals. And there's never been a generation raised with these kind of assaults on our ecosystem, and they're cumulative. We know that. The human biome and the human immune system is designed to take a lot of stress. But if it's being stressed every day, and your mitochondria and all of these different cell structures are under constant assault, from EMFs, from fluoride in the water, from the pesticides in your food and chemical residues everywhere in what you're breathing,
and mold.
There's no rest from it.
Yeah.
And so here's what we've had: an explosion of chronic disease.
Yes.
That has made our children, this generation of children, the sickest generation in history.
It's unbelievable.
And there's three categories, essentially, of chronic disease that we see now are epidemic. One is neurodevelopmental diseases, so ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD. Autism is typical. Autism has gone from 1 in 10,000 in my generation to 1 in every 34 in my children's generation.
Yeah, you don't see any people who are appreciably older, like Ryan and I are 40 this year, who are above 40. You
do not see. I have never in my life seen somebody with full-blown autism my age, and I was raised on the spear tip of the movement for intellectual disabilities. My family started Special Olympics. I worked for 200 hours when I was a kid in Waseca Home for the Retarded. We never saw people like this. We never saw, and by full-blown autism, what I mean is nonverbal, non-toilet trained, screaming, stimming, toe walking, agonizing gut aches. You don't see men my age walking around with football helmets and diapers at the local mall. I have never seen anybody like that. And yet at my kid's age, it's 1 in every 34 kids. Well, that's one category, neurodevelopmental. Allergic disease, and most of these appeared in 1989. In fact, Congress said to EPA, tell us what year the epidemic in autism began, and they came back and said 1989. It's a red line.
Wow.
So, and also that year, food allergies. Peanut allergy. I never knew it. I have like 70 first cousins, 11 brothers and sisters. I never knew anybody with a peanut allergy.
Right.
And yet,
a lot of Kennedys out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
No, it does seem like the peanut allergy. Yeah, I remember that blowing up, and it's like,
where did it come from?
Yeah,
and why isn't Tony Fauci asking that question? He's the head of allergic and autoimmune diseases.
Yeah.
He's not asking. We know where it's coming from. It's coming from these chemical exposures, and we know specifically which ones. But you also had anaphylaxis. You had eczema appear that year. You had
all these autoimmune issues.
Asthma, which was around, but it exploded.
Right.
And then and so we have all those diseases. And then the autoimmune disease, which is the biggest category, which is rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes. It's hard to find anybody prior to 1989 that had those diseases, and afterward, they're everywhere.
Yeah, colitis, all these GIs.
Oh,
yeah.
Here's what HHS says. In 1940, 6% of Americans had chronic diseases. So the entire universe of all those diseases that I just mentioned, only 6% of Americans had
So they
them.
existed.
They existed. This was 1940. There was already chemicals. There was already vaccines. One vaccine really, and there was chemicals, but they existed. That's probably close to a background level of what society ought to look like.
Yeah.
Okay, by 1986, it had risen to 12.8.
Doubled.
More than doubled.
Almost, more than doubled.
And then by 2006, it was 54%.
Can you imagine?
Oh, it's half our kids are disabled.
Yes.
And nobody's saying anything about it. Tony Fauci is not. This dwarfs coronavirus.
So let me just repeat that. You're saying 54%.
2006. This is HHS's own data.
So more than 1 out of 2 kids born will have one of these
has
diseases.
a chronic disease, lifetime chronic disease.
It's unfathomable. We got so much more to talk about, but first let's check out some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners.
Hey Hey, this is Jane in Los Angeles. I used to have a lot of trouble making decisions, and now whenever I go out to eat and I'm looking at a menu, I get 5 seconds to pick. And making quick, fast decisions has helped me get better and more comfortable with making decisions in other parts of my life.
Hi guys, I'm Brittany, originally from Montana and now living in New York. I wanted to call because you guys speak a lot about intention. While I believe that intention is important when buying, I also think we should use intention when we're decluttering. For example, I'm a huge movie fan and recently got rid of over 60 DVDs. Instead of dropping them off at the thrift store to be sold, I donated them all to my local library. Like so, my boyfriend was finally ready to give up his Xbox, so we found a local shelter that frequently has children, and we donated the games and consoles to them. While it does create a few extra trips, your things can really create value for someone else if you let them.
By the way, we have a bunch more surprise questions this week, like, Ryan, is there such thing as healthy competition? Also, when does it make sense to not trust the science? We're also going to talk to RFK about being banned and censored. We're going to talk about thought crimes. We're going to talk about apologizing and a whole bunch of other controversies. We're going to go deep on this one. Plus, we're going to answer a million more questions, controversial questions. And if you want to hear all that, join us on the Minimalist Private Podcast this week. Visit theminimalists.com/support to subscribe and get your personal link so that our private podcast plays in your favorite podcast app. It is cheaper than a cup of coffee, and it's really where we get intimate, where we go deep. Trying to think of other synonyms for going deep, Ryan.
Real mature.
Penetrating.
This is really where we... No, it's too far.
This is where we penetrate?
This is really where we get naked and make love. Wait, what?
Idea love.
Oh, idea. Oh, my bad.
Yeah. Idea sex,
Right.
as I've heard someone call it. Yeah, so no, what we do,
God.
we do talk about some things we don't talk about in public. We do that on the private podcast, theminimalists.com/support. You can follow The Minimalists on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Minimalists. Come to one of our live podcast shows. Visit theminimalists.com for event information. While you're there, you can also sign up for our email list to get our podcast show notes and minimalist writings sent straight to your inbox. If you have a question, comment, or minimalism tip, email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. And if you leave here today with just one message, let it be this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
The Minimalists.